This is James Arnold Taylor, the voice of Obi-Wan Kenobi. Welcome to a more civilized podcast. This is the podcast you're looking for. You may not go about your business. Stay here, listen, and then move along.
Welcome, everybody, to episode 2 of a more civilized podcast. We're going to be discussing the prequel trilogy today, which we're very excited about. But first, we have some announcements.
We do have announcements. And actually, you were going to take the first one we have on the list.
Okay, so this first one on the list, on our set list here, is Lego. I'm a big fan of Legos. I always have been as a kid. My parents wouldn't let me have Legos as a kid because I didn't clean them up, because kids never do. And then my dad stepped on them one too many times, and he's like, that's it. Took them all, sold them like in a garage sale, and I never had Legos again. Until I was older and could afford Legos for myself, and then I said I'm having Legos. So I follow Lego news, particularly Star Wars Lego news, because Star Wars Legos are the bomb. And Star Wars, or Lego just announced the new, it's like a huge, like Ultimate Collector's kind of a set, Cloud City. They've done some Cloud City sets before, but they were done a long time ago when Lego was just barely starting to do Star Wars stuff and their sets weren't great. But this new one is really cool. It's got a landing pad, it's got the carbon freezing chamber, it's got the dining hall where they have lunch awkwardly with Darth Vader. Yeah. It's got like a private room, like where they are talking, like where's C-3PO and stuff. It's got the garbage room or whatever where C-3POs gets blasted and stuff. It comes with a little cloud car. It comes with Vader and Boba Fett and Cloud City version of Princess Leia, which I could be wrong, but it may be the first time that figure has been done. It's got a couple of Bespin guards in there. Like, it's got a bunch of... It's awesome. It's super expensive, but it looks really cool.
This is in the like Millennium Falcon.
Yeah, this is the this is the higher end. You have a lot of disposable income because you're a nerd who doesn't like go to sporting events, and so spend your $400 on this. I don't remember the price, but I just thought it was really cool that they're doing a Cloud City set.
Nice. The next thing we wanted to talk about actually was the recent revelation as to the box office numbers of the Solo movie, which have been interesting and actually very weird as I've kind of done the research on this. So most of the big headlines that you read talk about how Solo is underperforming and that they're going to be losing money, there were several different numbers that were thrown out. Most of them were saying, I think it was 50 million. They needed like another 50 million to break even. But that's different than what you had put in the notes. Because, again, I'm finding a lot of different numbers, so I'm thinking there's some little kind of weird fancy accounting going on, but I'll talk about that in a second. So I got looking up to actually try and keep it all straight. It turns out Solo was $250 million to produce. Okay. I couldn't find numbers on their advertising budget. I was able to find something that said they spent about $5 million on some TV advertising. I mean, I think they was even also through a certain range of several, I think it was like a month and a half or something like that. But those numbers are not adding up to what they say is being a loss. Everyone's confirming that it is $392 million that they've taken back so far as of today. But with a budget of $250 million, advertising of $5 million plus, unless it's another, 100 and something million, which I suppose it could be. Yeah. They actually should be doing fine. Now, I took a film production class in college with my major. One thing they did mention at one point is that sometimes they will creatively shuffle around revenue so that it could look like they either took a loss or made money, depending on what they want the benefits to be after that. I don't remember what those were because it's been several years since I've taken that class now. But I do know that sometimes Hollywood will kind of shuffle around numbers. It'll look like they purposely want it to look like they took a loss.
But I think there's no way to get around it because a good rule of thumb in Hollywood is you take the production value and then add that again, and that's what your advertising is. So if they spent $250 million on production, that's about what they spent in advertising and P&R. Awesome. And so that gets you pretty close to around $500 million. And they just barely didn't break 400 million at the box office.
Yeah.
So that's still... And so it might be a little bit less on the production value, which is why they said maybe only 50 more million. Maybe it was 450, and so then 50 more million would have broken them even.
But again, I can't verify those numbers anywhere, which is the thing, though, that makes me think something's going on.
Well,
But
either way, there's some news.
Further updates as event report.
Indeed. This just in.
Alrighty, I think that's all for the news. Yeah,
it is.
Okay, so we can move on to the main part of the episode, discussing the prequel trilogy, which we all grew up with. We were there.
This first one
yeah.
hit when we were 13.
Young teenagers,
Yeah, we were 13 when this first one hit.
Yeah. Oh wow.
Was it 13?
Yes.
I was thinking 12.
Nope.
But still,
99.
That's hardly...
99. Wow. There we go. Yeah, so we were 13 when the episode 1 came out. So it was the first Star Wars movie that we got to see in theaters live, the full experience, the whole shebang there.
Did you guys do anything special for these releases?
Other than any talk of the lines with you about it at school, no. You, Ross.
No. I was not yet old enough to go out on my own, wait in line, do any of that sort of thing on my own. And that was not something my parents were doing for Star Wars or anything else. That is not my dad's style.
See, and wasn't that shortly before you moved into the neighborhood?
No.
Were you with us at the
time? We moved in October 98, and it came out in May 99.
May 99, okay. So yeah, we probably weren't as good buddies yet.
Yeah, but we still talked about it, though.
Right, but I was going to say that my friend Braden, that I grew up in the neighborhood with, he and I got tickets and made sure to go opening day.
Lucky duck.
So we didn't do any lines or anything, but we were able to actually get tickets.
We didn't do any lines. We did not go opening weekend, I know that, but I remember my parents did take us to see it. Or us. I don't remember. I remember going with my parents. I can't remember if any of my siblings came, or if it was just a special thing for me because they know I love Star Wars. But yeah, I remember going to see it in theaters and being really amazed at how good everything looked, and and oh my gosh, we have more than one Jedi versus one Sith. Like there are multiple people with lightsabers. This is really cool. And but yeah, we didn't do anything like. Yeah.
Now that you mention it, I do remember that always being a factor of when the prequels were coming out. I'd be sitting there just like, do you know how many lightsabers are in this movie? Oh my gosh! Look at all the lightsabers! That was a kind of a gauge of how well I would like the movie. Look at all the lightsabers. There are even more lightsabers this time.
Yep.
So what about for the other two? Did you do any lines for the other two movies?
Okay. Yeah, that's true. That was only episode 1 that we were talking about. Episode 2, I didn't do any... I don't think I did any lines for any of the prequel trilogy. Well, here's the thing, though. In between episode 1 and episode 2, the internet sort of becomes a thing, and you could buy tickets online. Mm-hmm. And so there wasn't as much of the old school, we're going to camp out for 3 days.
It depended on the theater.
It did depend on the theater.
There was also the camping out in line to grab a good seat, because even if you had tickets,
that's what it was.
Yeah. But no, I never did any of the lines for episode 2. I remember talking with you, Ross, and Braden at church one week about this robot, this droid that can use the Force because he has lightsabers.
You're right. With Grievous.
Yeah. General Grievous had come out in a trailer, a TV trailer, that I had missed. And I believe you, Ross, had also missed it, because I remember Braden coming up to us at church and telling us, oh my gosh, guys, there's a droid that somehow can use the Force, even though droids aren't alive. But he's wielding lightsabers, so he must have the Force. And we were just so excited to go see that. How in the world are they going to make this happen? A droid that can use the Force? And then, of course, he doesn't use the Force. He just has lightsabers.
He's just a droid.
And then episode 3...
Jedi.
Yeah.
Episode 3 happened to be the first movie that I ever went to see multiple times in the theater.
Yeah, I did the same as well.
That was the first one that I was like, I liked that well enough that I'm going to pay money again to go see that.
See, I think I saw it, I think it was 3 or 4 times.
I saw it 3 times. Yeah.
And actually, episode 3... No, wait a minute. I'm sorry, I'm remembering that wrong. It was episode 2 that I did the first midnight showing for, actually, because Braden and I... I think, weren't we... We would have been about 16 at the time.
Yeah, we would have
right?
been 16 at the time.
And so we had just gotten our licenses, and so we were able, we were mobile enough on our own to actually do that. And so we did the midnight thing. And I got, a little Jedi robe, and I think he might have had one as well. I had a little lightsaber and everything, The cosplay was a lot of fun that day.
That reminds me of a story. Can I tell a totally self-serving and embarrassing story quickly?
Oh, yeah. As long as it's embarrassing.
Yeah, it is. More so for her than for me. So, before episode 3 came out, I had met this girl, and she was cool, like from a distance and in small amounts. And up close and personal, she was a lot to handle. But she liked me a lot and had a pair of tickets to the opening night of episode 3. I was already planning up, before she told me that, I was planning on telling her, like, look, let's just be friends. And then she's like, hey, why don't you come with me? And I was like, does my love of Star Wars outweigh my desire to be a decent human being? The answer is yes, it does. So I went with her to the opening of that. She wanted to dress up. I didn't, so I dressed up anyway to make her happy, and we watched it, and it was awesome. And then, like, a week later, I was like, well, thanks for everything. You've been great, but let's go our separate ways.
Oh, God.
I'm a bad person.
So now when I think of the prequels coming out, I just remember how I felt when the news broke that, hey, they're doing a new trilogy. Yeah. And it was just after I got the special edition VHS set of the original trilogy, and I was just so obsessed because holy crap, these are so cool, and I love this, and then they're making more, and I was just like, the origins of Star Wars were just shrouded in the midst of unknowing time. I had no idea about the history of Star Wars. All I knew was these movies were older than me, and now they were making more. And was that a thing that they could even do? Apparently it wasn't. Holy cow! Why is none of my family as excited about this as I am?
And then there was the whole confusion about the prequels, coining the term prequels for that set of movies. Because, the movies are coming out later, so they're sequels, but they're before. I remember that confusion was all over the place for a long time.
Yep, that was so awesome. And I remember being confused as a child. Why is, what was for me, episode 5 is the first movie. 4. And then I realized later, of course, that there's episode 4, right?
That's right.
And then I'm like, okay, so 4. And then I asked my parents, okay, these movies are great. Where's episodes 1 through 3? And they said, there aren't any. This is what there is. I'm like, yeah, but it says episode 4, 5, and 6. So there should be a 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, I remember having that discussion with my mother as well. Like, why did they start at 4? That doesn't make any sense. Still doesn't. But.
Yeah, and so then, when the prequels came out, I'm like, finally, we get to know what the heck is going on in episodes 1, 2, and 3. This is going to be wonderful.
And starting at episode 4 does make sense. Because
in many ways it does. But
they're better stories. Let's just be honest.
Well,
right.
But it doesn't make sense when that's your first movie, though, and that was
well.
confusing.
And when the first one came out, it wasn't.
It wasn't.
4.
It was just Star Wars. Yeah. But one more piece of nostalgia here that is, at this point, more a part of my life than it isn't. So, as Ross mentioned earlier in the episode, I didn't live in this same neighborhood. I didn't know Ross when I was a little kid, and then when I was like 10 or 11, my family moved and happened to move into Ross's neighborhood. We lived, maybe a 10-minute walk, maybe a 5-minute bike ride. Something like that. About 5-minute uphill to Ross's house, and then about 2-minute bike ride back down if you didn't ride the brakes at all. And so that first Christmas after we moved in, I was like, man, this Ross guy is pretty dang cool. I guess it would have been the second Christmas, technically, but it was a year later, and I had become good friends with Ross.
Oh, that's
and I was like, man, I like this Ross kid. He's really cool. I have a little bit of money. I'm gonna buy him a present to show him that, he's my best friend. He's way cool. And I bought him the 1999, because it's the first year, that Lego made Star Wars Lego sets, the droid. They didn't know what they were called at the time. They're called Vulture droids, but they were just the droid, Star Wars droid fighter.
They called it the droid starfighter.
Yeah, the droid starfighter. They're technically called Vulture droids, but that's for another episode. Probably. We can discuss vehicles and vessels. That'd be awesome. But I bought him this Lego set, this really cool, and I thought that would be the Lego set that I would want if I were going to pick one out for me. So that's pretty cool. And Ross and I, we had discovered that we both had a love, of course, for Star Wars over this year. I would go to his house all the time and play whatever game that was on the Nintendo. I never knew the name of it. I just called it that Star Wars game that Ross has.
Well, I think it was just the Star Wars SNES game for A New Hope, wasn't it?
Oh, maybe. I just remember that Sandcrawler level was fetching hard.
Yeah, it was terrible.
I had to have you beat it for me.
Yeah.
But, so I bought him this Lego set, just a little cheap, like $5 Lego set or whatever they were. They were way cheap back then. And then a few weeks later, or probably a week later or whatever, it was around Christmas time, Ross hands me a present, and I'm like, what? And he hands me the box. I can hear that it's Legos, and I was like, man, this is awesome. He got me Legos. I love Legos. And we get to like Christmas morning, and I'm thinking, man, wouldn't that be dang funny if we got each other the same thing? Open it up. What is before me? The Lego Droid Starfighter.
Yep.
We got each other the same thing.
And see, so yeah, it really came about because we had the conversation just a few weeks before that I had never had Legos growing up, and you had thought that was such a travesty that I needed some. And there was Star Wars. I knew that it was a travesty because I didn't have them, and I had only got like the red bucket of Legos. It was like just a jumble of like random stuff, like the Christmas before. And I was like, Legos are the best thing ever. Ross, you gotta have Legos. And so, I even did a similar thing where, you know how when you're young and you are at Christmas, you, of course, hold the presents and shake the presents.
Oh, yeah.
And you're doing whatever you can to figure out what's in them. Well, the wrapping paper that you had used was just thin enough that I could kind of start to see, like, basic shapes. Oh, no. And so I could see... that it was Lego. I didn't know where to look for the Star Wars logo on it. Of course, I already knew that because I could shake it. And I was just in kind of like looking at trying to find the outlines of things. Like on the main part of the box, I could see there was roughly a same shape as the thing. And I thought, that'd be kind of funny if that happened. Sure enough, we opened up the next morning, or whatever morning, a few days later. Christmas morning. And there it is. At first I'm thinking, wait a minute, did I forget to give it to him? This is actually the very same set I was holding.
Yep. And so every year since 1999, Ross and I have given each other Star Wars Legos for Christmas.
Yep.
We are much older now. And I still look forward to finding out what set Ross gets me for Christmas.
I do the same.
Going on a 20-year streak.
And it's like at this point, we can't stop now.
No,
for 20 years, we got to keep going.
Well, because the second time we did it, we both had the same idea to commemorate how funny it was the first time.
Yeah.
And so 2 years in a row, well, that's a pattern. So
yeah. And then by the third year, it's like, well, 3 years in a row. This is tradition now.
2 years in a row is a coincidence. 3 years in a row is a pattern.
Okay. Fair enough.
And every year, a couple of years, we've managed to get each other the same thing. But fortunately, Lego has diversified enough in its Star Wars sets that usually we don't. Usually I get Ross something rebel themed, some sort of good side themed, and he knows me well enough to get me the darkest evil he can find.
No, I usually look for someone that has a pack that has the guys and they have hats.
Yep.
Because you like the hats.
I do. The accessories are important.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
All right. So, we've got next on the list, we've got the impact of the Star Wars prequels. What did these do for Star Wars, for movies, for the world, for the greater good of mankind?
Well, for Star Wars, the more I think about it, the more I'm actually impressed by what it did. So we've had, and we're going to have a discussion later on The Force Awakens, not Force Awakens, Last Jedi, and the complaints and things around that. Kyler and I have had many discussions about Snoke.
Have we?
Yes.
Have we ever?
And about, what happened to him in that movie. One of my major points... I know. Hold on, we're getting to it. One of my major points is that, Snoke basically was the Emperor for the new series, but they just kind of did they kind of ended his story a little quickly. And Kyler and the internet, have their, he needed a backstory, he needs all this other stuff. When, again, also... Snoke being the Emperor didn't at the time, right? Well, with the prequels, it actually did give you something of that backstory. It lets you know how you go from a republic, which, us deeper Star Wars geeks knew that it was a republic before an empire, right? Mm-hmm. So it showed you the progression and how really just evil and maniacal Palpatine could be. Whereas, it's unfathomable that one person can go in, take down a democracy, and make it a
I'm going to specifically address that. It is not unfathomable.
Yeah.
I have that here. I guess I could talk about,
let's talk about that with the good, because that's, I think, well with.
But again, it's in from those of us that aren't history majors and don't know all the history and how it apparently has happened.
I have literally dedicated portions of actual college class time to this topic.
Really?
Yes.
Oh man.
Teaching history via Star Wars.
Yep.
I love it.
But it was just amazing to give that sort of context and how that actually all played out. And also even the sequels have given a lot other additional insight into how that really worked, which again we'll get into later.
Yeah.
It really, and Chris, you mentioned this earlier, that it really reinvigorated this franchise. It took this franchise that everybody said, wow, that was a really great thing from my childhood, and I'm going to show my kids it, and they'll think that this is a really cool thing from my childhood, and made it a part of our childhood.
Yeah.
It basically said Star Wars doesn't have to be dead if we don't want it to be.
Yeah.
And here are 3 movies that are going to tell more Star Wars.
Which was very, very much something George Lucas always wanted. He wanted it to be an ongoing, growing series. He didn't want it to just be a self-contained. He always had more story than he could put on the screen, and he always wanted there to be more. And I actually read a thing that I don't know if this is accurate. This was not from a reliable source like Wikipedia or anything, but I just read somewhere in passing that Lucas actually didn't expect, he kind of thought, all right, I'm going to finally get those prequels that I've wanted to do for so long. I feel like the special effects are where they need to be for me to pull off what I wanted. I'm going to make those, and then, I'll be done, and that'll have been fun. And, it's the release of the special edition showed him that there was enough interest in it that he was like, yeah, I think I can actually do this and have another trilogy. And he did not necessarily expect it to keep being an ongoing thing. He wanted it to be, but he didn't necessarily expect to get... He didn't realize just how dedicated his fan base was in some ways. Maybe. I don't know if that's actually accurate, but I like the idea that he was caught off guard by, holy cow, it's still going!
Part of the love that Star Wars fans were able to, or part of the reason that they were able to maintain that love, is thanks to Timothy Zahn.
Yeah.
And the slew of Star Wars books that came out in the early 90s, early to mid 90s, but particularly Timothy Zahn's Thrawn series.
Yeah, his trilogy there.
That was really well written, and Star Wars fans loved it, and it kind of kept that flame burning strong, so that when Lucas said, hey, what do we think about doing a prequel trilogy, everybody was down with it.
Yeah. You had Zahn's books, and then you had all the other books, and the whole extended universe. You had the comics were a big deal, and it just kept the love and the desire for more going in a lot of ways. I would also add that impact-wise, aside from Star Wars, the special effects,
yes,
and we'll talk more about the good and the bad of the special effects, but just Lucas loved trying to push the envelope. That was always one of his big things, is just, I want to go further, I want to do things differently than other people have done. And so he was very interested in, let's try something different. No one had ever, to my knowledge, not on a large scale that got a lot of public awareness, created a movie with that degree of digital effects.
Yeah.
And it came out right around the same time as The Matrix, and so it was really easy to put those up next to each other, where The Matrix used a lot more practical effects and withstands the test of time a bit better because of it, I think. But to see just the scale of what they created, and in large part thanks to that the use of digital effects throughout the entire trilogy, was very impressive and very groundbreaking, and changed a lot of things about the way movies, and especially sci-fi and fantasy blockbuster movies, were made.
And that goes back even to the original trilogy. The special effects that Lucas had for the original trilogy were literally groundbreaking stuff that nobody had done before, and then stuff that everyone does after the fact. And so then you get to him in the 90s going, well, we have this new technology, let's see how far we can push the envelope here within Star Wars. And I think, overall it pays off. Episode 1 definitely holds up the least of the prequel trilogy as far as how the special effects look. I mean, especially the final battle on Naboo in the fields. The droids, they look a little fuzzy on higher definition TVs and stuff now. The special effects just don't hold up as well. By the time you get to episode 3, though, those special effects are good, and they still hold up really well.
Partly because at that point they'd been doing this for almost 9 years of just let's keep pushing this and developing this further to it like no one ever has before.
Right, and and so going back to the whole nostalgia thing, sitting in the theater watching that final battle, both on and above Naboo, that just blew my mind as a kid. I'm going, holy crap, we've got all these droids, and they're all of them, they did all that with computers? Yeah. They did all these droids and stuff fighting in space with computers. That looks so good. And then, as it progresses and continues to look better, one of my favorite scenes in all of Star Wars, and I'm talking any of the live-action movies that have been produced, one of my favorite scenes is still the opening Battle of Coruscant in episode 3. When the camera pans down and you see all the ships just broadsiding each other, and then it follows you and you just are weaving through the battle. That scene is, that's 100% digital, but oh my goodness, that looks so good.
All that and the kitchen sink.
Yeah.
Well, and that's part of the problem is that with the opening of episode 3, it is all digital. You don't have the live action stuff to compare against.
Oh, that's true.
So there's a little bit of a bias when you can actually have something to compare next to things.
Well, but as you get into the battle though, and they're doing the cockpit shots of like the clones and the Jedi and stuff, what you have is practical people, but there's a whole field around them that is all digital, and it still looks really good.
But the positive upshot of the way he pushed those special effects is that we got, I like to put it as if without Phantom Menace, we would not have Gollum in The Lord of the Rings. They very quite possibly, we can't say for sure, obviously, but it's quite possible they would not have considered the Lord of the Rings movies to be possible even, or to on the scale that they ended up doing them. Without what Lucas did with Phantom Menace.
And the first time somebody does something like that, of course it's not going to be as refined and polished as later. Yeah. But I think that's kind of what we're all saying, is that episode 1, even though it doesn't hold up as well, we can still look at it and go, George, you do deserve a pat on the back, though, for what you did for filmmaking technology in general, not just for Star Wars, but he really did allow other filmmakers, like you said, to do things that they really wouldn't have been able to do before.
And I remember reading, or watching behind the scenes things on something, so where in some cases they were basically just going to Star Wars, to Industrial Light and Magic, and just wholesale picking up technology that had been developed in-house for the Star Wars movies and going, that's awesome, let's use it here now. And that's
that was impressive. That was another one of George's companies.
But that's what I'm saying. So they were developing these things, though, specifically for what he wanted to do with Star Wars. It was Star Wars that was pushing them to develop new techniques and all this stuff. And then other movies would go, wow, let's just take that wholesale and use that program or use that device or use that method.
Why reinvent the wheel when Lucas already invented it?
In a lot of cases. Or, people taking it and refining it further, like Gollum. Like Gollum is... we've reached a point where we can watch the old ones and look at Gollum and go, oh, he's not as perfect as he seemed back then.
But
even now, he holds up really well. That is some amazing digital, and that was them taking what Lucas had started and going, okay, let's refine this even further, which is how all creativity tends to work in the long run. So,
oh man, good times.
So, do we want to talk about the good first then? The good, the bad, and the Phantom Menace?
Sure. Let's do it.
Any objections?
As long as I go back to a little good afterwards.
Oh, of course, we'll go back.
Just making sure.
It's Star Wars. We're going to talk good about it, one way or the other.
Oh, man. Can I take that first bullet point? Okay,
Absolutely.
Great. So, the actual story for as much crap as the prequels get, and they do get a lot, deservedly so in some cases, the actual storyline is marvelous.
There is a lot of beauty and a lot of great
so
stuff
good.
In the stories.
And this is, I was trying to pull up my actual lectures to actually just read off literally word for word what I shared with my college students. But Palpatine's rise to power is Hitler's rise to power in Nazi Germany, almost shot for shot. That Palpatine, right? Palpatine and Hitler. We have two egotistical maniacs, power-hungry maniacs that are politicians. They can't get into power the way they would like legally. They can get into power legally if there's an emergency, but shoot, there isn't one, so you're out of luck. Oh, look at that. You create your own emergency using the already established powers of dictator to be made dictator in an emergency, and then you just don't give those powers back. Literally Hitler, but I also just described Palpatine. Hitler, he after being elected Chancellor didn't have... Oh, Chancellor, by the way. Chancellor Palpatine,
using that
right?
title, yeah.
Okay, and Lucas, by the way, in the original trilogy, consciously modeled the Empire after the most evil organization he could think of, Nazi Germany, which is why their uniforms have that kind of like olive drab uniforms and things
generally,
like that.
dictators in general, like when you get these severe dictatorships, those sort of uniforms tend to go along with them.
I'm talking even about the specific coloring of the uniforms. That was specifically attributed to Hitler. Stormtroopers. Hitler had stormtroopers, and he just Lucas wholesale lifted the name for Star Wars.
Yeah, lifted the name.
But when Hitler was Chancellor, he saw that he was like, I'm just one step away from ultimate power here. I just need an emergency, but things were kind of okay. Nobody wanted to go to war. We just finished World War I.
The Great War.
Yeah, and so he said, well, I need to then manufacture an emergency. So he burned down the Reichstag, the Senate building, essentially, lit it on fire, and then ran outside. His stormtroopers ran outside to conveniently find a passed-out drunken Dutchman who was visiting the country, who also happened to be a communist. They then accidentally, with some big old air quotes, killed him before his trial. And then Hitler said, well, obviously it was this communist here starting fire. The communists are going to take over the country. This is an emergency. Look, they already burned down the Reichstag, so this is an emergency. Just give me temporary dictator power, and I will get the communists out of our country, and then everything will be fine, and I will totally give the power back. So they did, and he totally didn't, and we have World War II.
Which, I mean, is the basic format of demagoguery in general.
Exactly.
Is, well, people will listen to me if I keep them panicked enough about what could happen, so I will find anyone I can point at, those are the bad guys, and I'm going to keep them convinced. These are the bad guys, there is a horrible... Things are about to happen if we don't stop them now.
Right.
Because that allows, even in what is still a democracy, that is how demagoguery works.
And so then Palpatine, he is Chancellor. He's almost there, but he just can't quite get it done, so he manufactures a war to scare people up, hype them up about what could happen. Just give me emergency power. Oh, look at that, the war is over. I'm not going to give my power back. Sorry, guys.
In fact, we're just going to make this an empire.
Yep. So, yeah,
he actually does that repeatedly through the movies.
So I wasn't kidding earlier when I said that I actually devoted a significant portion of one of my college lectures to making this comparison. And then when we got to the part where Hitler took power, I actually just had Palpatine going, ultimate power, unlimited power! A great gift there. It was awesome. My students thought it was pretty great.
We can all be glad that Hitler did not have the Force.
Yes, that would have been...
Because the Emperor succeeded.
Yeah, that's true. So yeah, the story, man, that actual story of how Palpatine gets into power is just incredible. Yeah,
there are some really, like, just from a historical perspective, Lucas was doing the same thing he always did. He was drawing from all sorts of sources, left and right, and with an unusually for him heavy historical draw as well. And yeah, there's a lot of really great stuff. There's a lot of great archetypal stuff that he's using, where he's pulling, especially he pulled heavily from Eastern religions and Eastern motifs and history for like designing the Jedi to a large degree after the samurai class in Japan, and a lot of their behaviors and a lot of the Jedi philosophy that he shows them using is very Eastern influenced. There are a lot of heavy Christian motifs where you've got this fatherless birth that is
wait, we're not talking about the bad stuff yet, are we?
Well, no, but it's very classic. It's very archetypal.
Yeah, it is.
And like I said in the last episode, a lot of times when people try and pull heavily from archetype, it just doesn't work. And with these prequels, it did not work to the degree that it did with the original trilogy. But there's a lot of very heavy archetypal moving stuff that can remain moving despite a lot of flaws.
And one thing too, going back to last episode, what Ross talked about how Star Wars sort of influenced his actual like moral center of I don't want to go to the dark side, so I can't be angry, right? I think they do show a good job in the prequels of showing that, look, if you break these rules, if you aren't true to your moral center, if you do get angry, if you do get out of control, like that is the path to the dark side. You know, and Anakin's path to the dark side, I still talk to my kids about that today, where I'm like, look, you know, look at Anakin, this is what happened to him. If you don't learn self-control, if you don't learn to manage your anger, if you don't learn to follow the rules, you know, like that leads to bad stuff. And it is a good it's an adequate demonstration of that. I think the Clone Wars TV series fills in a lot of that and makes it a good story, because that actually shows a lot more of Anakin's descent into the dark side.
Okay, so next on our list of good things about the prequel trilogy, we've got some of the acting is pretty darn stellar. I know, at the time I wasn't paying attention to any sort of critical reviews or anything, but since then I've gone back and looked, and Liam Neeson in particular got a lot of praise for his portrayal of Qui-Gon Jinn.
Yeah, he was the first person I was thinking of.
Looking back at it and thinking, I remember even being cognizant of this at a younger age still, that when I started realizing just how rough the dialogue was in a lot of ways, and being all the more impressed with how well he managed to pull off delivery of some of those lines.
Yeah.
And then Ewan McGregor, particularly as he comes into his own in the second and third one, he knocked it out of the park. I remember when he got cast and just being like, "You are no Obi-Wan, sir," and sort of thing. And then as I got into it, it was just like, "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, Ewan, that you are Obi-Wan."
Now he's even more Obi-Wan than Sir Alec Guinness. You know, it's like I think of Obi-Wan, and he's who I think of first, and then I think of animated Clone Wars Obi-Wan, and then I think of Sir Alec Guinness. It's sad and like a slap in the face to Alec Guinness, but I'm going, man, but Obi-Wan, though, he really like channeled the spirit of Alec Guinness in that role and did a great job with it.
And I'm sure that Sir Alec has just rolled over in his grave twice because of A, being remembered for Star Wars, and B, not being the best.
He'll never come on the show, right?
I know.
Yeah.
We ruined it.
Our seance plans are ruined.
We'll never get an EVP of Sir Alec Guinness. But
Ian McDiarmid.
Was
excellent.
Yeah, and what a cool story. So
that's the Emperor.
Yeah,
for most of you listening.
By the way,
so but not the original Emperor. So fun
right.
Star Wars history here.
Yeah, not an Emperor.
So in Episode 5, the original filming of Episode 5, Empire Strikes Back, Vader gets a call from the Emperor. So he says, okay, move the field out of the asteroid, or move the ship out of the asteroid field so we can send a clear transmission. And he gets a man in a robe who's the Emperor, and he says, like, oh, the son of Skywalker's alive, you know, he could be a threat to us. And that's when Vader says he will join us or die. I'll turn him, okay? And that actor is, I don't even know who it is, but it's not Ian McDiarmid. It's not the Emperor that you see in Return of the Jedi.
Unless you were watching on certain later
updates.
So, but that's why we're talking. The original one, they had chimpanzee eyes, like modeled, to put over him to sort of disfigure the face. And I always thought it looked really weird and gross as a kid. And then later, George Lucas, with the special editions, whatever, swapped it out and had Ian McDiarmid say the lines, and they actually put the Emperor in.
Well, it was after special editions, or did they do a second?
He's done multiple special editions.
Yeah, he's done a lot of revisions.
Currently, Ian McDiarmid has been retconned into that role, which I think is a wise choice. But then you get to actually see the Emperor in the flesh in Return of the Jedi, and the person playing him is like a 30-something-year-old Ian McDiarmid, who's been all uglied up with special effects and wrinkles and gross makeup and whatever, and he kind of like weirded up his voice to make the Emperor that we all know. Fast forward 20 years, something like that? 20-ish years.
Well, between Return of the Jedi
83
and
to 99.
Prequel, would be 16 years.
Okay, so Lucas says, hey, I'm going to make new Star Wars movies. Would you like to be in them, Ian McDiarmid? And he says, yeah, sure. And Lucas says, okay, here is part of the script. Why don't you go ahead and read some of the, read through. I've marked up what your lines would be for this character. I already have a character in mind for you. And he's like, okay, great. And so he starts reading through them, and he gets back to George and he says, hey, is this the Emperor? And Lucas is like, yeah, it sure is. We're going to tell how the Emperor got into power. Is that a role you would like to play? And he was like, yeah, of course I would. That would be awesome. That would be way cool. So Ian McDiarmid, when he first read the script for episode 1, didn't even realize that his character was going to be the Emperor until he started reading the script and was like, wait a minute. Wait, I've got lines for this Senator Palpatine guy, but also Darth Sidious? Why am I Oh, and then he put 2 and 2 together and was like, oh, so I'm playing the Emperor. Okay, yeah, I'm in. Yeah. I'm in all the way. So yeah, really cool. I'm excited to meet him at FanX.
Yeah. Ray Park was quite, considering the fact that he didn't actually do any of the voice work, and he was just being looking interviewed. Scary and being really acrobatic.
Yeah,
he was actually part of the stunt crew originally.
Yep. Oh, was he really?
But he did so well at it.
He was,
that they cast him.
He was part of the stunt crew and was like, "No, you need to do it like this." And so he's doing all these flips with the bow staff, essentially the double lightsaber, doing all these things. And they're like, "Okay, cool, that's a wrap for the day, guys. Everybody can go home." He's in his car on the ride home, and he gets a call on his phone. And he picks it up, and he's like, "Well, this is weird. Maybe there's some emergency, or they've changed the schedule for tomorrow. I don't know." He picks it up. And they're like, cool, it's George Lucas. And he's like, hey, you've got the part. And he's like, what part are you talking about? He's like, oh, for this Darth Maul guy that you were doing the stunts for. We're just going to go with you. You have the part. And he's like, oh, okay, cool. And so, he didn't even, there wasn't even, an actual interview. It was just Lucas observing him trying to teach the stunts to the other people and going, you know what, let's just go with this guy.
Yeah.
He's solid.
Yeah.
And considering that he didn't actually say the lines, so he's basically silent. He acted the heck out of that role.
Yeah.
There's a reason they brought Darth Maul back over and over again in various media.
Yeah.
He's intense, and a lot of that goes to Ray Park.
Yeah.
Oh,
Did
man.
a very good job with that.
I am always a fan of Christopher Lee in any form.
He's so cool.
And and that was a tough role to step in as the primary kind of soldier villain in Maul's place, as the dragon to the Emperor's.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of complexity there. I would say it's the most perfect thing ever, but I do think he did a pretty solid job with bringing that role the gravitas and seriousness it needed.
I agree, and one of the things, too, that I remember best about Count Dooku is the scene with him and Obi-Wan, when Obi-Wan's been captured on Geonosis, and he comes in, and he's like, oh, my friend, how did this happen? I'm so sorry, we're going to get this taken care of right away. And he's all chummy, and I remember, even the first time I saw that, going, wow, you slimeball. Because we've seen, all your other stuff going on. We know you're a part of the bad guys, and you come in here, and you wear that friendly face so well. You turd, you big jerk, get out of here. Nobody, get out of here, come on. And I just remember thinking, wow, he did such a great job at that, because he's able to flip just like that from totally conniving, cunning tactician villain to, oh, I'm totally sympathetic because this is totally going to play into what I want if you'll just play along, Obi-Wan. And just like that. And I'm like, wow, he did a great job. My complaint, though, with Count Dooku, just for 1 second, is Darth Maul is so cool. Mm-hmm. I wish Count Dooku hadn't been present as a character. I wish Maul had been the villain for, episode 1, 2, and then he gets killed at the beginning of 3, and that's why Grievous takes over. I think that would have been a tighter, more smooth
Reportedly, so did a lot of the people involved in this project. They didn't really quite... It didn't really quite connect to them just how well they'd hit the mark with Darth Maul until he was already dead. He was already sliced in half and should be dead, and gone. And they went, oh, Gaul, how do we even follow that up?
Yeah.
I think that's one thing that if they were to go back and be able to change it, someday, if Lucas still owned the rights and was able to, he would totally, 15 years from now, go back and replace Count Dooku with Maul in all of these.
I can't believe I forgot this when we were talking about kind of the nostalgia factor earlier, but I remember sitting in the theater and watching Darth Maul raise his hand out with the extra long lightsaber handle, and it goes by pretty quickly, but I remember in the theater seeing it for a long time that it seemed like his hand was up there forever. And I'm like, that's a really long lightsaber handle. What in the world is going on with that? And he extends out the one blade. I'm like, okay, with you so far. Bladed lightsaber. I got you. But why is it so long? And then he presses the other button and the other side extends. I just about lost my mind in the theater going, oh my gosh, he's got a double-sided lightsaber? Nobody, of course, had ever seen anything like that. And I'm just going, how are they even going to handle this? Here's a guy with a double-sided lightsaber. He's going to win for sure. And it just absolutely blew me away. I mean, that's a moment that I still look forward to. Like when I watch episode 1, that's a moment where I'm like, oh, here it comes, here it comes. Oh, there it is. It's so cool.
Nicely done moment.
Oh, man. Had to mention. I can't believe I forgot that earlier.
No, yeah, that's great.
Well, and even just the fact that they have that fight and set a new bar for lightsaber fights in the
Well, that kind of leads into one of the other good things we were talking about is the lightsaber fights. Man. Maul versus...
it is funny to me because I remember I had a point... I think it was at some point in the teenage years when I'm playing Star Wars video games and just like, oh my gosh, lightsaber fights are so cool and all the stuff they can do. And then coming to the realization that actually there wasn't that much to them until the prequels took, like they were great, solidly choreographed fights. Particularly Luke and Vader in their two encounters are very, very solid, very dramatic and emotionally moving and well choreographed. Like they're, I watched a video of a sword master, a guy who teaches sword fighting, watching various lightsaber fights and rating them, ranking them, and he had a lot of great stuff to say about those original fights and just the physicality of them and how they reflect what they're thinking and doing, and it's all beautiful. But for pure just adrenaline spectacularity, for the sort of thing that makes teenage boys and younger boys and girls go, holy cow, that's so cool! The prequels knocked it out of the park.
Within the prequels, it is hard to top Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon versus Darth Maul, with him literally like flipping in the air and taking on like... there's some debate worth it, but even people that just unilaterally dislike Phantom Menace that I've talked to will usually stop and go, that lightsaber fight was awesome.
Well, but the thing is then you have to think about the fight between Obi-Wan and Anakin at the end of episode 3.
Yes, I love that one.
For me,
it's also
that one,
really good.
I like that one quite a bit more. I mean, obviously, both of those are still miles ahead of I can't remember their names all of a sudden. Obi-Wan, Anakin against Dooku. Yeah. Yoda against Dooku. Yeah. I mean, it was cool to see Yoda do something and kind of see how little Yoda would fight. But the emotion and the drama behind the Anakin Obi-Wan fight is miles ahead.
I will give you that one because it is a definite like emotional callback to Return of the Jedi when you have Vader and Luke and just that confrontation.
I will say, even with that fight with Dooku, there is a moment that I just love, and it's because I read the novelization before the movie came out, and Ari Salvatore, he's the one who wrote that novelization, and the description of that lightsaber fight I just loved, particularly because there is a moment in it where Dooku, like they explain specifically that Dooku is one of the few Jedi who has actually learned fencing. Mm-hmm. He's not he hasn't just learned to block lightsaber blasts and follow what the Force tells him to do. He has studied fencing, which is why he's such a threat. And where he's fighting Anakin after defeating Obi-Wan, and he goes to move past him and just like hits this wall of force, of the Force, like and he is just has this moment of holy crap, this kid is powerful, and just like the sheer amount of power that Anakin is bringing to bear is almost more than he can handle, and he only narrowly triumphs. And there's that moment where he slices off Anakin's arm, Force pushes him back, and then he just has this moment of where he just breathes in this sigh of just. And I love that moment because it's really the only indication that the movies give us of what R.A. Salvatore wrote there.
Yeah.
That Dooku had a very frightening moment there where he thought he might not win.
And speaking of the whole fencing thing, that is, canon because he gives a fencing salute to Yoda.
Yeah. With
which he doesn't give to Obi-Wan and Anakin because he doesn't respect them. He's like, you guys are trifling, this is going to be over before it starts, so I'm not even going to bother. But he sees Yoda come in and he respects Yoda, both as a former teacher and as an opponent now, and so he gives him that flourish salute there.
Yeah, slightly more flourishy.
Yeah, and that's pretty cool.
Definitely.
That's really pretty cool.
Does he do anything? Does he do a salute at the beginning of episode 3 when they have their fight again?
I don't believe so.
I don't think he does, no.
So he still keeps that disrespect, which is interesting.
Yeah.
Well, because why respect him? They didn't beat him. He beat them.
True.
And then Yoda comes in and nearly beats him.
Very true.
But he defeated them. They're still, beneath his notice kind of a thing.
Yeah. I would also... So, very big. We discussed special effects and the influence they had, so I don't feel like we really need to go into that again. But visual design on these prequels.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there is some cluttering, there is some over-digitization, all this stuff, but holy cow, just the sheer amount of creativity and, like, I'm not even one to geek out about these things normally. But I remember, like, I got, when Phantom Menace came out on home video, I got the big box collector's edition that came with, like, framed film cells of the movie.
Oh wow!
And it's got a art book of the art behind the Phantom Menace, and just some gorgeous, amazing stuff. Rick McCallum's still in charge there, and he apparently specifically went out of his way to recruit artists who had never worked in film before. He kind of pulled what George wanted to do with the acting, where he went, no, I want people who aren't going to be influenced by what everyone else is doing. I want people to bring fresh ideas. And so he specifically went out looking for people graduating from architectural programs and other things to help him design this, to try and make it as fresh and new as possible. And I think they did a lot of amazing stuff.
Yeah.
Except for Dexter's his diner.
I love that diner.
I liked it.
So dumb.
No, I can totally understand that perspective, I will say. But I love it so much.
I'm kind of with Chris on this one. I like it anyway. I realize that it's kind of dumb and kitsch and doesn't quite fit with the start, but I loved it anyway.
Well, and this is something that I've thought about that we can discuss when we're probably at some point with the expanded universe, that Star Wars is so unique to itself, it's not related to our world. But the more you create in it, the more you're inevitably going to have to draw upon our world to some degree or another. And that diner is one of those areas. And I think, and I like the way they did it. The way they hit a point where they're like, everything we're designing for this is how I'm picturing it at least, is everything we're designing for this feels too familiar. So why not just
hit it,
run with it, and just go full 50s diner? It's the era of the Flash Gordon originals that we were trying to evoke in the first place.
You had a Jetsons waitress.
Yeah.
All you were missing was the little sound effect as she walked by.
Yep. And it's a fine line to walk, and I totally understand people. I understand your perspective of nope, they missed the mark. But I love it.
With that said, I do like Dexter's design.
Yeah.
He's a cool looking character, and actually that was basically George's idea. He walked in, they had a bunch of different alien sculpts in clay going around, and George just kind of walked around and was like, okay, I like this part of this guy, that part of that dude. Yeah. So if you could just take these and just mash them on each other. Yeah. That is what George is kind of known for, apparently.
But yeah, I love what they did with, I remember at the time watching them and going, one of the jarring things for me is that when you place the prequels next to the original trilogy, visually they are so different. Obviously there's ties and they've tried to make some consistency, but to go from this opulence and everything to the forced sparseness of the original trilogy was very weird for me. But the more I look at it over time, the more I like it. Because it reminds me of watching Memoirs of a Geisha, or studying Chinese history, Japanese history, where you look at Japan in Memoirs of a Geisha before
The American
but yeah, before
stuff.
World War II and before the fall of the Emperor and all these things, and how drastically that impacted just their whole culture. So much was lost in so many ways, and China's even worse, where you had this rich and vibrant culture, and then how it changed once the communists took rule, and how severe and simple, because communism necessitated a certain degree of cookie cutter, like that's how it is in the Soviet Union.
Interesting comparison. I'd never thought before, but that is a really good comparison.
And that's exactly like I compared, like, everything in the Soviet Union was just very cookie cutter. They're mass producing buildings so that everyone can have something. It's not about appearance to a larger degree. It's about making sure everyone has something, because that's how communism works. And so everybody does, but it's very, in theory, everybody does, but it's very utilitarian. It's very simple. And so looking at it from that perspective, more and more over time, I like looking at the prequels and then the originals and going, that's what happened, is the Empire came in and smashed it all. And all this culture and all this uniqueness between these different parts of the Republic just got ground under the foot of this stormtrooper Nazi empire.
Yeah.
And I love it.
Yeah, that's I am really glad you brought that up. I'm going to use that in the future now. Anytime I talk about Star Wars, that's a great comparison to make, and very accurate. Especially Memoirs of a Geisha, because that movie does such a great job of showing the before and after effects of the war.
Yeah, it's
and the occupation, and it's so, that is such a great comparison to make. It really is very accurate.
Thank you.
Well done. Gold star for you, Chris.
Yay. Yippee!
There it is. What is it? Don't do it next episode, otherwise it's tradition.
I was going
to say, throw it in there.
I know. Yeah.
Hopefully the sequels will be removed.
One of the designs that I, not so much the sets, I guess. I mean, Naboo is really pretty.
Yeah.
But I really liked as a kid, and even as an adult, I like seeing the retroactive designs, that the clone troopers become stormtroopers.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
That your acclimators and venators become star destroyers.
Yes.
I remember seeing episode 1 in theaters and being like, okay, or episode 2, I guess, is when we get clones. And being like, okay, these are the good guys, but obviously these become the bad guys. How in the world do we get from A to B? And I hadn't, I was dumb, so I didn't know my history back then.
We all were.
Yeah, but I thought that was really cool, and I liked in episode 3 how they've kind of taken the phase 2 clone armor and made it kind of a halfway point between the phase 1 in episode 2 and your stormtroopers, and I'm just like, okay, I see it now. We're getting close to where the Empire's going to be a thing, and I love that kind of
I agree.
Showing us how things kind of got to where they are in the original trilogy. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah. Well, and not to take too much away from our next episode talking about the sequels, seeing it again with the Stormtrooper update in particular.
Yeah, I do like the First Order Stormtroopers. I think they look just slick.
And then you also get, in episode 3, you've got their ships with the S-foils that lock in.
Yes, the ARC-170.
Yeah,
the ARC-170, obviously the precursor to the X-Wing. Well, one of the precursors to the X-Wing.
Yeah, there's a lot of
the Z95 Headhunter is the other.
The technical father, but
Well, yeah.
The S-foils, Oh, S-foil, by the way, I didn't know this for a long time. S-foil stands for strike foil. Oh. So set your strike foils to attack position. Yeah.
Cool.
And you separated them to get this, dissipate heat, because that's how space works. But that was the idea.
Wait. No, I thought it was supposed to be a help with the shields.
I thought it was a weapons configuration thing. I thought.
No,
I don't know.
I guess it depends on which one's.
No, it's supposed to better dissipate the heat going from your lasers on the wings, on the tips of the wings.
You know what, anyway. Listeners? Whatever technobabble explanation you like best, just go ahead and make that your headcanon.
That's why you tune in for random facts like that.
Quick aside, because I was going to ask earlier when you were talking about the novelization of episode 2, how much of that is still canon? Do you know?
None of that.
The novelizations, I think, it was like with the originals, that the novelizations aren't canon, but there is.
They are currently and this is going to be 2 episodes from now, listener. We're going to talk about Disney's purchase of Star Wars and everything that happened as a result of that. But when Disney bought Star Wars in 2014, I believe is what it was.
Something like
whatever it was. When Disney bought it, they said everything is gone. Nothing is canon. except for the 6 live-action films we have made and the Clone Wars TV show that was currently on TV at the time. Anything beyond that was gone. So all these novelizations were gone, but they've gone back now and have started re-novelizing, if I can use that word, the movies. Okay. So there are going to be others, and a lot of times they go back and get the same authors and say, we want you to write that same story again, but let's just make sure everything fits and is narratively consistent.
What about the visual dictionaries that they do? Are those also non-canon?
All those are not... Well,
technically
they're non-canon, but a lot of it has been recanonized because, like, StarWars.com will put images from the... Like, you know, they'll put, like, the image of the Acclamator cruiser we were just talking about. Right. And they put it up on Star Wars. Well, now that's canon. Yeah. That page of that book is canon.
This confusion here is something we'll definitely talk about for that Legends versus
Yeah, that's
Disney
another...
episode,
anyway.
That's... and I'm going to real quick toss out for the good things. John Williams.
John Williams.
Man. John Williams
man.
is the man.
It didn't...
Duel of the Fates.
My favorite piece of Star Wars music is Duel of the Fates.
Yeah, I love Duel of the Fates. So I love Battle of the Heroes.
Yes.
Duel of the Fates is the music playing during Darth Maul's lightsaber fight, for those of you who might not know the name.
In Episode 3, you have Battle of the Heroes, which is the song that plays over
Anakin
Obi-Wan and Anakin's fight.
Plus also the Yoda
and
Emperor.
Yoda and the Emperor, and it was John Williams deliberately taking Duel of the Fates and going, okay, now we're going to progress this further. Yeah, and I mean everything else in those, but particularly those two stand out.
Are so good.
I remember listening to Duel of the Fates and just being like, you know, you've got Star Wars music, you've got the Star Wars theme, you've got the Imperial March, you've got the Forces theme, you've got so many of these that are just so iconic. And watching that and I got the soundtrack as well, and listening to Duel of the Fates and just being like, how did he do that? Like, how did he make another piece of music that can slot in right next to these and stand on the same level and just be so iconic?
Just a sec. In my history of buying music for, you know, being a geeky band kid and, you know, loving instrumental type music, soundtracks and the like.
Band kids, you said weird.
You were right there with me, Mr. Baxter.
Yes.
The first album that I ever bought and listened to all the way through was Episode 3. I mean, when I say listen all the way through, I mean like bought it, got home, put it in a player, and just sat and listened to the whole thing. It was an hour and a half long, if I remember right. It did not feel like that to me. Loved that stuff so much. Even the updates to existing music, I found interesting because the original theme. It always starts off with this, you know, very kind of grand ba, you know, and it goes off and then resolves into the main Star Wars theme as the credits crawl. Yep. In episodes 1, 2, and 3, he kind of went back and readdressed it and kind of not juiced it up, but brightened it.
Huh. I like that.
And I don't know if that was a recording problem or whatever it was. I mean, of course, the music has been re-recorded and re
John Williams doesn't have recording problems.
Well,
he's perfect.
Yeah. No, but I mean, like maybe it didn't take the dynamic range, but the main theme for episodes 1, 2, and 3 are a lot brighter than what 4, 5, and 6 were. One thing I am disappointed in, though. So at the very end of episode 2.
So right now we're going to transition into problems.
Well, yeah, actually. At the end of episode 2, you're kind of watching kind of the aftermath of, you know, the rescue from Geonosis and people are having little conversations kind of foreshadowing episode 3. Yep. You have this scene as the music is kind of swelling going towards the end credits where the Emperor plus a couple of senators are looking out over where those Acclamator cruisers are just being loaded up with the stormtroopers, right? It goes into a new version of, well, not new version.
The revised version of the Imperial March. Yeah.
I was so excited for episode 3 when we finally had like an established empire, and I wanted so much to have a real nice polished up Imperial March.
Yeah.
Never happened.
Never did do that.
The best we got was that ending in episode 2, which is great, by the way, which is my favorite piece for episode 2. But
before we transition as well, episode 2 actually has a great piece of music as well, Across the Stars.
Love theme.
The love theme that plays when they're going into the arena, when Anakin and Padme are and Obi-Wan are getting put out into the arena. Yeah. That music there is really, really great and very memorable.
Yeah.
It's really good. I don't think it's as good as Duel of the Fates with Maul, but I think it's more recognizable, and I think it's better than the music from episode 3 that you talked about with Anakin and Obi-Wan. I think it's better than that.
Oh, I don't know.
Anyway, I would also like to really quick thank the prequels for Geonosis for letting me see just not lightsabers, but yes, lightsabers. Like I said, there's so many lightsabers. Letting me see Jedi in battle. Like,
Yeah.
Clone Wars gives us a lot more of that, but I remember just being blown away with Attack of the Clones of just, this is a battle. You've got these huge machines trundling through this dusty area, and you've got just blaster shots everywhere and Jedi running through the midst of it. And oh my gosh.
And then you get doubly that in episode 3. And
and even more of it. And I love that. I eat it up
great.
still, obviously.
Oh man, I think we're ready to talk about the bad finally.
Yes.
We're finally there.
The bad.
Oh boy, this should be interesting.
So if you don't mind, I'm going to start us off on
Go
the
for
writing
it.
because that is my thing. So there are a lot of problems with the writing of the prequels. The most painfully obvious, I feel like, is the dialogue, which George himself has flat out said, yeah, it's not my forte. I forget,
why did you write it, George?
Well, I forget. It was like an award he was receiving after episode 3, where I think it was in the awards, the thank you speech for that. He acknowledged, he was just kind of like, yep, that part's not my forte, but thank you for this. Like, he's like, I know that I don't have all the strengths, and it wasn't just him.
Yeah.
Like he brought in Kasdan.
Larry Kasdan.
Larry Kasdan, who helped write Empire Strikes Back
And Return of the Jedi.
and Return of the Jedi, and helped on these as well. But a lot of dialogue, the yippies, basically anything Jar Jar says,
It's
a lot
so
of
bad.
there's just a lot.
See, and this is one of those things where I'm going.
The entire love story is just not there.
It's
more or less.
In large portion anything out of Anakin's mouth.
It's so bad.
But there is a lot of stuff too that just
and it makes me so sad because George Lucas is a good storyteller. His idea for where the story starts at point A and where it needs to get at point B and how it gets there, those are great. He is wonderful at that. But the dialogue, the minutia, is where he fails. And so we talked about this last time. Episode 4 and 5 are great because you had people like Larry Kasdan going, great idea, George, let me help your script a lot.
Yeah.
And then the prequels come along and nobody can tell him no. And what you get is terrible writing.
I think happened, but and then beyond the dialogue, there's a lot of pacing, particularly in Phantom Menace. Phantom Menace is very breakneck. It's almost a travelogue of let's go to this place now, let's go to this place, let's go to this place. And there's a lot that was even just cut out in the deleted scenes where it's just like, oh, we want to go to Otogunga, and now we want to go through the planet core, and then we've got to hit this place, and it's breakneck, and it's a little much throughout it. Which, I mean, one of the reasons for that was George just loved showing new things. He wanted to go to new places every single movie, which is great, but overdid that to a certain degree, particularly in Phantom Menace. But throughout
Phantom Menace is particularly bad, but episode 3 I feel he actually does kind of okay at showing a lot of places because the Clone Wars are in full swing. And so it's like, here's this general on this planet, here's this general on this planet.
The disjointedness of the pacing smooths out throughout each of them.
But Phantom Menace is particularly bad, especially in the gear up to the pod race.
Yeah.
It's like 20 minutes of them talking about the pod race, preparing for the pod race. A
whole lot of expository dialogue throughout all 3 of those movies.
And the pod race itself is actually fun, and it's like, so just get there, stop talking about it, and just let's see the pod race then. They could have condensed all that preparation into about 5 minutes and given us 15 minutes off the movie, or 15 minutes more of Maul, in an even better
And then
world.
there are some problems of tone and focus where... And part of this is audience expectation, which is its own thing. Like, to live up to audience expectation at this point was already a horrible, horrible thing to have to try and match, and continues to be. But there's also the problem of, like, Lucas has always wanted Star Wars to be something that kids can pick up and watch. It's not necessarily entirely for kids, but he wanted to make the sort of thing that he loved as a kid. And so... With a lot of forms of media, you look at comics, where there was definitely a very juvenile stage, but as superheroes moved, it's superheroes comics specifically here, as the kids who read those at a young age grew up, they wanted more and more. They wanted comics to grow up with them, and so comics did. I mean, Batman is a great example with the movies. You look at Adam West's TV show and then the movie, and then you compare that to Tim Burton's Batman, which you then compare to Christopher Nolan's Batman, and how that just keeps getting more and more adult in a lot of ways.
Mature,
more grown up.
Yeah.
And that's something that a lot of people want. They want their beloved franchises to grow up with them. Other people do not. Other people want it to stay that, like, we all want it to stay what it was, but we want it to grow with us at the same time. And Phantom Menace in particular, I think, definitely missed the mark on trying to meld what it was and bringing it into this new era. It's childish in a lot of ways.
So it's the awkward teenage phase.
You have,
in some ways, yeah.
It's so bad though because you have actual poop jokes.
Yeah.
You know, Jar Jar steps in poo and icky, and he literally pulls a Michelle from Full House. Oh, how wooed! It's like, really, George?
Yeah.
Really? What is your audience? 5-year-olds?
There was always some silliness. There was always some rule of cool justification in the original. There was. It wasn't silliness
there was,
is a strong word, maybe. But
yeah, I don't think it's silly. I just think it's almost like a dry British humor.
There was some of that
in the original trilogy.
But there was always some. There was just always some lightness, and it descended into slapstick a number of points in the first
doesn't
one.
fit Star Wars, and that's why Jar Jar I think is so jarring.
I think you can fit it anywhere. If you do it right, it wasn't done
right. Yeah.
Slapstick is the worst part. Like we were discussing before we started, is the worst thing about Jar Jar is that he is a comedic character that is not actually funny.
Yeah.
And even for kids, a lot of kids will laugh at Jar Jar, but it doesn't take them long before they reach an age where they'll go.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and I remember as teenagers not having that big a problem with him until it was on TV years later. Yeah. And then I realized, that guy.
I see why people dislike him so much. I never found him as grating as most people, but he is a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, and my feelings on Jar Jar are summed up by Qui-Gon Jinn at Anakin's house when he snatches his tongue and just says, "Don't do that again." You can just see the irritation on not Qui-Gon's face, on Liam Neeson's face, and I'm just going, "Yep, right there with you, buddy."
Yeah.
Good thing George didn't do that again.
So I mean, I appreciate George trying to keep this very pulpy, trying to keep this something that kids can watch, even knowing that where it's going to descend in the third episode. But yeah, definitely strayed too far into lightheartedness and slapstick by any metric. I feel like you'd have a hard time justifying the degree to which they went over the top. And a large part of that was just, look at what great toys these are going to be. It's like, look how silly this is, kids. This is for you, and it's over the top. People can tell when you are giving them story elements for a reason other than telling a great story.
Right.
We can kind of instinctually sense that you're trying to shove this down my throat for other reasons.
Which is so sad because Star Wars has such a great story inherent to the narrative that the toys are going to sell themselves. You don't need to worry about trying to shove something on screen just to sell a toy. It's Star Wars. The toys are going to be off the shelves anyway.
But they
just
are
tell
going
a good
to
story
worry about that because money is king.
Yes, but it's just like, I don't know. I feel like they missed the mark that it's like you don't have to create it for the toy.
Yep,
Make it for the story, and the toys will follow, and the toys will sell just fine.
And with that, they wouldn't have really thought about that at the time because remember, they're trying to kind of reboot a franchise.
I don't think they didn't not think about it at the time.
No, I'm sure it was a hope that it was just as big as the first ones, but you can't actually predict that, right?
Yeah, but it's still Star Wars. I mean, you have Kenner selling empty boxes, actual empty boxes in the 80s of Star Wars toys. Don't think for a second that if you decide to reboot the franchise, you're not going to get decent success.
We talked last time about Lucas's shrewd planning in keeping all the merchandising rights for himself, and by the time they were making these, everybody knew how shrewd that was of him, and everybody knew that you can merchandise the heck out of Star Wars.
Yeah,
but had it completely failed, I don't think it would have been as big a success, the merchandising.
Oh no, yeah, but if everything had... Yeah, I mean, there was always the possibility it was going to fail, but they did plan for the merchandising to a large degree. And then the problems of story, of all the tone, everything of that leads us to some of the acting. I was going to say the rest, but it's like, no, there's plenty of middle ground, just sort of like, oh yeah. I mean, I'm never unhappy to see Samuel L. Jackson on screen at any point ever, but I would also not say he's a highlight of the prequels by any means for me.
Yeah.
Although I do really appreciate him for getting lightsabers other than those main 3 colors to be canon.
Yes.
I appreciate that because
he's
it always
great.
seems silly to me that we only have these 3 color-coded ones. Let's get some more in there.
Yeah.
Well, and I will admit, though, as much as Samuel L. Jackson is a background character, his little conversation with Dooku and those sitting on the balcony in Episode 2
It's pretty good.
Jedi Shaft is a thing. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's so much, like, Frankaz is still
Jedi
wonderful.
Shaft.
Haven't you heard that? Oh, yeah.
Frankaz is still wonderful as Yoda. All of these. But then, I feel bad ragging on Jake Lloyd to start out, just because he has had it so rough since these movies. He was so young, and
I don't even think we need to go into it a whole
well,
lot.
and just
everybody
even
knows.
instead of ragging on him, just ragging on, like, we look at Kelly Marie Tran now, we look at Daisy Ridley and all the crap that they've gotten, John Boyega, everybody involved has gotten some sort of crap from some fan somewhere, especially Kelly, but Jake Lloyd was really, I'd say, the first person to really just have the Star Wars fandom.
Well, and the internet had just become a thing, and so everybody was like, "Cool, anonymity, great."
And at the age he was at, that was particularly
just awful.
So, Jake, we're sorry, man.
But also, part of the problem is it doesn't entirely rest on them, because Hayden Christensen is bad. Natalie Portman, although beautiful, is not great at her acting. And the thing
she is normally an extra. I want to caveat that too. That's why we know it's not just them.
And that's what I'm getting to, is that like a major portion of their acting, the way they act, is George Lucas's directing. He's telling them, no, do it this way.
Or he's just doing what he did with the originals and just being very hands-off.
And the result is you
get
get terrible performances, whether by direction or lack of direction. And so I'm going, Jake Lloyd, not a great performance. Hayden Christensen, not a great performance. Natalie Portman, not a great performance in this. But I don't think the blame is entirely theirs. I think a lot of it has to rest with George Lucas.
And I will say personally, like Jar Jar, I never had the problems with Hayden that everyone else did.
Neither did I.
I did in episode 3.
I can see everybody's complaints. I understand, but at the same time, like, especially because the moments that everyone harps on, the sand discussion, and
there
basically any point where they're trying to be romantic.
Cringy, 2 episodes with Hayden, or 2 portions with Hayden, that I just go, man, that was really bad. You should, if no one else was going to, you should have said, hey, can we do another take differently? But is after he kills the sand people and he's talking, and he's like, I killed them, I slaughtered them like animals. I'm going, boy, that is just cringeworthy. It's so bad. And then the other is in episode 3 when he's talking with Padme and she's all in her black dress and it's the firelight and that whole scene is just like, ugh. It's like watching really bad teenagers try to write and then perform love dialogue.
And I think a large part of the trouble, like, there are so many movies that have been derailed by a lack of chemistry between the actors. I don't feel like Natalie and Hayden had the chemistry they needed to pull off, and lacking some of that chemistry on top of the roughness of the dialogue and the script, and
it just made
and the plotting of that romantic arc,
bad scenes,
and the awkwardness of them first seeing them at such, it's not that big of an age discrepancy really. But the fact that we see it first as a 9-year-old and a 14-year-old is really awkward.
And even though the age discrepancy might not be that difference, 8 and 14 or 9 and 14, whatever it is, but developmentally, they are in 2 completely developmentally different categories. That he is still very much a child. She is a young adult. But so then it's really weird.
Age-wise, that's the same gap as between me and my wife. It's just flipped.
Well, right, but what is weird then is you have that in the back of your mind in episodes 2 and 3 that you're going, but you're too, this just feels icky.
Especially because they hit up at the beginning of the second one that she remembers him that way.
As a little boy,
and they did not do the legwork to convince us that she ever changed her perspective on him. And it's just icky. It's icky.
Yeah, it's no good. So, there we go.
That's a big problem because that romantic arc is so integral. George made that the reason he turns to the dark side in the end. is over her, and it was never sold to us the way we wanted. However, I will say for Hayden, in his defense, that one of the reasons he was cast, Natalie Portman said at one point that it was because he was able to pull off both lighthearted, youthful naivete and just this darkness that he does do quite well in a lot of scenes. Just this grim severity that he meant. In fact, it's part of what undermines the romance is he can do young. He didn't do romantic so well.
Yeah.
He was still a little cringy, a little disturbing throughout all that. Especially with, when there's just how I pictured you in my dreams.
Yeah. That's not
dude.
like psychotic stalker at
That
all.
is, nobody gets seduced by that, George. Come on.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Talking about the politics. A lot of that's one major complaint is that there's too much politics, too much Senate debate, and all that stuff. I actually didn't have a problem with that.
I didn't either.
I kind of liked it, but that's because I'm not terribly athletic, nor have I ever won any fights I've been in, save one.
I'm really
by
looking forward to
accident.
seeing how this connects back in.
And so I have always had to rely on my wit and hopefully talking my way out of whatever trouble I'm in, because I certainly can't fight my way out of it. And so for me, the more intellectual aspect of the prequels, where it is Senate discussions and plotting against your enemy rather than going out and clubbing your enemy to death in the face, with your lightsaber, it's the plotting, it's the spider pulling on its webs. I liked that a lot because that resonated kind of with how I operate.
But I'd say and also you're the historian. We're watching that and going, "Holy cow, it's Hitler!" And it's a well done analogy there.
Yes,
but for a lot of people, it was a significant departure from the methods and tones and plot elements of the original trilogy.
Yeah.
To go from this it's a swashbuckler. He wanted Flash Gordon. He wanted just this super fun, awesome, and then he got mired in so much political. It's like a lot of people. You hear that's a common complaint with it. It's like first Star Wars in 16 years. Holy cow! And Trade Federation delegation debating. What? And I get that. It is a significant I agree that I love so much of the politics, but I feel like they could have been presented better. They could have gotten less mired in them, and it could have been less of a. They could have focused fewer plot points on them and more on the characters.
So it's not so much the decision to include the politics; it's the balancing the amount of politics with the amount of swashbuckle.
The amount of expository discussion of all this, when so much of it could have been swept under and just been like, things are happening, you can pick it up from context. We're not trusting our audience to do that, which is not great writing.
Yeah.
Effects-wise, there's also a lot of complaints of the over-digitization. The dark side of George pushing the envelope there is, it's how we learned that too much digitization can be a very bad thing, which is why so many movies these days are pulling back, specifically the Star Wars movies, pulling back from that.
Well, and for a comparison, too, you look at the original Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
Dang, that movie looks good still.
Holds up,
it came out in 94
unless you really know what you're doing like this.
Okay, I was going to say.
The Raptors at the very, very end aren't great, but because they used the special effects, the CGI effects so sparingly, the movie holds up wonderfully.
There are several things to that. The first is that you had fewer minutes of actual CG effects in Jurassic Park, so they could spend more time making those look good. I hate this debate with how, older movies look so much better with their CGI. What's happened? No, they didn't. They really did not. If you actually go in and look at it,
if you break down the specific effects that are CGI, you can see that.
Well, and in Jurassic Park is always the one that gets brought up for some reason.
And remember, listener, this is Ross's wheelhouse. This is what he was educated in. This is what he does professionally.
I am a 3D artist. Yes,
3D
so,
art.
So the one that really gets me, the Raptors, they were fine. They actually did. I don't have any complaints with those. Going back and watching it, the one I hate the most is that Brontosaurus at the beginning.
Brachiosaurus.
Oh yeah.
Is it a Brachiosaurus?
The long neck.
Whatever it is.
The long neck.
The Daddy Littlefoot.
Yeah.
Wow, that takes me back, my own reference. Anyway, when that Brontosaurus, Brachiosaurus, whatever it is, stands up, you can almost see the edge lines of the model.
Yeah.
Because it's so old.
It is
also,
an really rough moment.
the shadows in its skin, in the folds in the skin, you should see shadows and things. As it reaches the edge of the model, you don't see that cut in the skin. It's just a flat plane. We called it a normal map where, today we'd use a normal map. They weren't using them back then. Anyway, what they're doing is they're taking a this isn't even Star Wars. I'm just
Just go for it.
Anyway, it's normally what you'd want to have happen is the model would actually follow that fold, but because of processing ability, because of errors in lighting, all sorts of technical limitations, you get around all these little cheats to kind of make things look more detailed than what they really are. And with how old that is, you can see those tricks. You can see what's actually making them. And so I get so upset when people start talking about how good Jurassic Park was. It was great for the time.
And there's still a lot that does hold better than you expect. I'm not gonna. The entire T-Rex breaking out of the paddock. It's almost entirely it's traditional effects. It's not CGI, and it holds up wonderfully.
Yeah. Right.
Watching it crush the rover and all the other stuff that it does, beautiful, amazing. The CGI work, absolutely. That scene you're talking about, I'm picturing it in my head and going, oh yeah, I have noticed that. That's a good point.
Rant over.
No, great.
Thank you. Thank you for listening.
But Star Wars also helped us learn about over-digitization, about the way that once you use too much digital, you start to lose your physics. Like, we don't have a physics engine here. And that and the two Matrix trilogy, the two Matrix sequels really helped us see that too much.
That's a good point. The lack of a physics engine, you really see that particularly in episode 1 when they use the Force to knock down droids. Mm-hmm. The way that the droids fall feels unnatural, and then when they hit and slide, it always feels unnatural. Like either they slid too far for what the terrain feels like they should slide, or not far enough. Like that in particular, pushing the droids with the Force in episode 1, you see that it just something is off somewhere.
Yeah, and so that's actually also transitions well into why I put the lightsaber battles into the bad side of our list as well, because there are complaints about the physics of some of it, where the flippiness gets a little too much. Yoda dancing around. It's particularly in his fight in number 3 with the Emperor, pretty solid all in all. But there's when you actually watch the second one with Dooku, there's almost no contact.
Yeah.
It's just spinny. Occasionally our lightsabers touch.
It's almost like Yoda is being button mashed by someone who doesn't know how to lightsaber fight, and they keep pressing the dodge or the roll, tuck and roll dodge maneuver, and they just keep doing it over and over again. So he's bouncing off the walls, but not actually hitting.
That is a
Count
perfect.
Dooku. Yeah, that's what it's like.
I love that.
While meanwhile, the player who knows what they're doing is standing in the middle of the room, going, "Okay, please engage me."
Yeah,
and then they have to do that in all the video games, and so he's almost unplayable in everything you play him in.
It's tough.
Yeah, and so and none of lights, even the one with the Emperor, you don't really feel any heft from Yoda. Like, Yoda doesn't really feel like he's catching their lightsabers and holding them back. It just kind of feels like they stopped their lightsaber there. This was that video I watched of the Swordmaster. He watched a lot of the prequel ones. That was his big complaint, is he's just like, none of this makes sense. Mm-hmm. Like, there are sequences within them that make a lot of sense, but they also took the rule of cool a little too far. Where it's like, if it's cool enough, it's justified. Grievous with his 4 lightsabers,
like Darth Maul flipping around when he does his bat flips and stuff. Rule of cool, absolutely. And dang, it's close enough that it works, and you just go, I don't care, that was cool.
Yeah. But they also, when you look at the Obi-Wan's fight with Grievous, it's like, oh wow, 4 lightsabers that he doesn't use. So we immediately cut 2 of them off because we just can't choreograph a fight where Obi-Wan could stand up to that feasibly.
And then
even then we barely use them.
That first attack always annoyed me because Grievous is spinning these lightsabers in a windmill. Both of these lightsabers are going the same direction, and Obi-Wan just kind of pokes his lightsaber in the middle of it.
Yep.
Like, it doesn't get pushed down. That's exactly what should happen.
And then Grievous is countering 2 of those, and he has the other 2 just down here doing nothing. He could
Obi-Wan
totally
should be dead. That's all we're saying.
Yeah.
But no, I remember back when we were young kids and episode 2 had just come out, that same friend Ross mentioned earlier, Braden, he got to see it before I did, and I think before you did as well. I can't remember, but definitely before I did. And he was telling me, "Oh man, you get to see Yoda sword fight, with the lightsaber, and it's so cool." He was super jazzed about it, so I didn't know what to expect because no one had ever seen Yoda do a lightsaber fight before. And so when I got into the theater and watched it, I remember being disappointed because I'm going, Yoda's not fighting him. He's jumping around really fast, faster than I think he should, but he doesn't actually fight. I wanted an actual, I wanted to see Yoda duel. An actual lightsaber duel, and you don't get that. And so I've always been disappointed.
Hold on, I have one first. Caveat to this. We do understand they are Jedi, and they are, in fact, using...
Yes.
In canon, they're using the Force as they're doing this. But...
even in fantasy, you have to give a veneer of reality, or people cannot suspend their disbelief.
Or at very least, you have to show them that it's happening. You have to let them know. Because most of the time, with the special editions, anytime, Vader was choking somebody, in the originals, the person would just kind of sit there making choking noises. In special editions, they added in this rumble. So you can know something was happening with the Force.
Which was a good call.
With all these, jumping and running around and everything, we don't actually get any sort of thing that says, oh, the Force is being used, other than we just kind of assume. So
I will also add for a lot of... that was another... audience expectations thing there too, where a lot of people were upset because the traditional explanation for Yoda, for the Jedi Master versus the Jedi Knight, was that the Jedi Masters had progressed beyond the need for such crude things as weapons. They did not need even elegant weapons for a more civilized age. They just didn't do that, and so a lot of people were quite upset to see Yoda with a lightsaber. They were like, no, he doesn't do that, which I think is whiny. Personally, I get it. It's not without its validity, but at the same time, it's you know what? He was a Jedi, and this is well before you saw him there.
And
whatever.
In certain situations, a lightsaber has its place.
Yeah. I will also add that as silly as that fight was, Yoda catching and then throwing back lightning
is cool.
Yeah, that was delightful. No, that was delightful. I loved that.
I didn't, but that's okay.
I thought that was cool. So,
but I also we need to mention. There's that YouTube video that went around for a while. The one that actually...
the kid that got bullied?
No. Well, there's that one too. But that's just, kid having fun. I'm thinking of the one that actually goes through and is commenting on the Darth Maul fight, the Qui-Gon Obi-Wan Darth Maul fight, and showing how when they're actually making attacks and things... where that attack is supposed to land, no one ever was, right? Yeah. Like Obi-Wan will make a slice. It's supposed to be near Darth Maul's head, but his head was never in that position. That Swordmaster
commented on that a lot, too. He's like, why are you even swinging there? That's not going to hit anything.
Yeah.
Why is anyone bothering to block that?
So here's another little fact about me. I taught fencing, sport fencing, for a while. Yes, you did. Every attack you make should be the quote-unquote finishing blow, right? You don't make an attack unless you intend it to land. Yeah. So yes, there was a lot of that, but also... maybe we should talk about this more in the sequels, but it fits here. The guard issue that everyone had, with Kylo Ren's lightsaber, having that cross guard on it, that cross guard is so stinking important.
On a sword
fighting.
Generally.
Yeah.
A cross guard that can impale you just as effectively as the sword blade, maybe not quite as practical, but...
Well, in real swords that have metal that slides, yes, the crossguard's important. Here we're going deep into
the binding. Yeah,
yes, so when lightsabers hit, they don't actually slide on one another, or at least they're not supposed
Except
to.
We've seen them.
Except we've seen them do it, but they're not supposed to do it. Basically, the lightsabers sort of catch each other in their own energy and stop each other. So the crossguard isn't fully necessary.
But see, that's such a retcon for, they should be sliding here, but they're not.
Yeah.
And there's so many things that you can do with sliding. It's such a powerful tool to slide your sword around to be able to maneuver the other person's sword into a certain position that you want it in, So that is my complaint with the fights.
There are also a few things, these are accusations that have been leveled at the prequels that are not, I would say, without some validity. There are some awkward racial things, like the fact that the Trade Federation, they have a Thai accent. Yeah. They're played by British actors.
Yeah.
That have no Asian blood whatsoever. You've got Watto was pointed to as an example of a negative Jewish stereotype. Now, there's a lot of those that a lot of the people involved went, whoa, no, that's not what we're intending. I personally just think it's an effect of we're drawing so heavily from these old pulps and everything that had so much negative racial stereotyping in them that when they're drawing from those, some of that just carried over. I like to cut them a break and say, yeah, probably that's what was going on here. It's not intentional.
I can't imagine that anyone, especially in the 90s, is going, you know what this movie needs more of? Asian racial stereotypes.
Yeah, I would like to believe that as well. Jar Jar is another one that gets pointed to a really lot as negative.
But what is so weird is he's played by an African American character, and he's the one who came up with Star Wars. What did I say?
Character.
He's played by an actor. Sorry, not a character. The character is played by an actor.
Yes.
But he's the one who came up with the voice, with the mannerisms, with how to portray him. So I'm going, well, it's not necessarily George's fault when the African American actor decides to portray the character in a stereotypically African American,
something
negative,
something
whatever,
that could be pointed to as an example of negative stereotyping. He clearly did not feel that way. He clearly missed that.
Right. So, and I think
it's
a lot of the racial stuff in it, the racial accusations of like, oh well, we're being demeaning to Jews and Asians and African Americans, I think people are just fishing for it after the fact.
There is a lot of that, I would say, but I also think that it's not without validity. Like if you are going to give a bunch of characters Thai accents, just have some Thai people play them.
Sure.
Don't have a bunch of British actors do faux Asian accents, because faux Asian accents have a long history of really inappropriate usage.
And you can tell that they are faux and not real.
Yes, exactly.
I mean, you look, I think, Chow Yun Fat or whatever, who is the guy, no, that's not the actor from Memoirs of a Geisha. Who's the main guy in Memoirs of a Geisha that she falls in love with? That guy is a fantastic actor, and he still has an Asian accent that is very clear and natural and sounds like it. Donnie Yen is another one.
Donnie Yen, okay? His accent in that.
His accent.
Cashin's accent in Rogue One. Yeah, these are all fine because they're real.
And that's the thing, is that they sound real.
Yeah.
Whereas the Nemoidians, there's a deep Star Wars reference for you. The Trade Federation people are called Nemoidians from the planet Tato Nemoidia. You can tell that they are fake Asian accents, and it sounds bad.
You outgeeked me with the planet name. I knew that they were Nemoidians, but I didn't know the name of their planet.
Never challenge me again.
It wasn't challenging. I know better. But yeah, so that is definitely something that is not entirely specious. It probably also not
intentional. I don't think.
It's not intentional. It's not as demeaning as it can be put out to be, but it also is, there is some problematic stuff there. So,
alrighty.
But let's wrap. Like we said, wrapping up on
a good note.
This is good stuff. The prequels get a lot of hate. It's not unjustified in a lot of cases, but there is some really spectacular stuff that we've done.
The story is really good, as we said before. I think one of the most important things to come out of the prequels is the Clone War TV series by Dave Filoni. It is spectacular. It's great.
I would also add that if you want more of those stories, if you want improved version of those stories, go pick up the novelizations.
Yeah.
Because Terry Brooks, Ari Salvatore, I apologize, I do not remember who wrote the third novelization, and I did not actually read that one. But those first two, I remember reading those and just being like, wow, there is some detail here. Mm-hmm. There is Anakin in Terry Brooks' novelization. I buy him a lot more, both as a child and as the dark person that he becomes. Like, you see a bit more of what his life has been like as a slave and what effect that has had on his personality. That in the first one, George really wanted it to be like, oh my gosh, this little innocent kid becomes that, but it was too much. It was kind of like this little innocent kid who was raised in abject slavery.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like, he should have a little less innocence than he has.
Yeah.
Anyway, but back to the good stuff. Like, there is a lot of solid, wonderful stuff here.
You get great music. You get great lightsaber battles.
They were generally well reviewed. Even the ones that are panned the most, they generally got pretty decent reviews. Attack of the Clones generally is the lowest of the three.
Well, it's an interesting phenomenon with Star Wars, how, and I guess maybe it's just the hype train that we all get on. Movie comes out, everyone loves it.
Yeah.
Little bit of time goes by, people start thinking about it again, and like, oh, you know what, maybe this, and then it kind of snowballs into this was terrible.
And or that the people who loved it, their voices are significantly overwhelming the people who did not in a lot of cases, I'd say.
So what we're saying is, what is this, 15 years-ish after the prequel trilogy is over, we sort of settled into the final, this is about where they're going to fall permanently.
Hopefully, yeah.
So in 10 or 15 years, we'll have an actual sense of where the sequel trilogy is.
Yeah.
Probably my favorite way to kind of think about this was actually pointed out by a cracked.com YouTube video talking just about Star Wars. The guy's kind of going through giving people a primer on what you should or shouldn't watch, when going into I think it was when going into the new sequels. And he's like, you know what, and this one's kind of about this, but you can kind of skip this one. But not me. I'm going to watch them all forever.
Yeah.
But you can skip it.
Well, and that's I have literally given presentations on fandom and movie, and one of my favorite points that my soapbox is quality and enjoyment are not necessarily linked.
Yeah.
Just because you enjoy something doesn't mean it is good. Just because something is bad doesn't mean you can't enjoy it. Just because something is good doesn't mean you have to enjoy it. You can still dislike it. Charles Dickens is an amazing writer. I hate everything he has written.
Hey, me too. High five.
Yeah. But hate's a strong word. I can respect how talented he is. My enjoyment of his writing is separate from the quality of the writing.
Right.
And there's always some muddy gray areas where something works for someone, doesn't work for someone else. That doesn't mean it's good or bad. But there's also, we can all look at the prequels. I love the prequels. My enjoyment of them is not linked to their quality, but I can still look at them and go, yeah, these aren't spectacular. Like, there's a whole lot of anger and fighting that goes around just because people are going, no, I enjoy it, therefore it is good and has to be good. I cannot look at this through a lens of through any sort of critical lens.
You see that a lot with Harry Potter fans. Yeah. I'm not a huge fan of Harry Potter. I don't particularly enjoy it. I've read all but the last book because I have no incentive to read the last book. But I know a lot of people who are like, how dare you besmirch the name of Harry Potter?
I adore those Harry Potter books. They are wonderful. Mm-hmm. Too bad they never got made into movies because those probably would have been fun. But yeah, the fandom in general, we can all dial it back a little bit. Yeah. I love the things I love, but oh my gosh, if you're getting angry over it, if you're getting vehement, that's a good time to step back and go, you know what? I don't have to be angry here. Mm-hmm. It's just a movie.
Not till the next episode when we talk about sequels.
Yeah, we're not going to get into too much of that now. We'll save that for the specific episodes.
But I'm with you. I recognize that the prequels have their flaws. Yep. Some of them are very evident. I don't really care, though. I love it anyway. It's still Star Wars.
It also helps that they came out when I was at an age where I was not too inclined to be that critical.
Exactly.
Well, and you know what? Here's another good point that I should have mentioned earlier that I kind of forgot to think about. What it does to kind of progress the world of Star Wars, the prequels, you have so much more to kind of build off of and attach to in those movies rather than what A New Hope and the rest of them did. Yeah. So, I mean, they're incredibly important for the whole universe and the story as a whole, but they just have some warts.
Yep.
Well, I think that about wraps this episode up. So, you're welcome to follow us on Twitter at More Civilized. And on Facebook, please join our Facebook group, A More Civilized Podcast. We'd love for you to join the discussion that's going on there.
The website.
Oh, the website is...
A More Civilized Podcast. Oh, wait. Hold on. It's More Civilized Podcast.podbean.com.
Yep, that is what our podcast is named, everyone.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, we're pretty sure. Yeah?
Pretty sure.
Okay, yeah. Looks like that.
Yeah.
We've already made all the social media pages and everything, so it better be. I'm going to personally put in a plug for... last time I gave you my blog, I'm going to give you... if you are listening to this after September 7th, 2018, which you almost certainly are, you can go to Immortal Works Flash Fiction Friday podcast, the one that aired their Flash Fiction Friday live podcast that they recorded, that they aired on September 7th, and you can find a flash fiction story of mine there for free if you would like to. I would love for you to listen to that. It is called Rest in Peace. Have a good time with that, please.
All right. Until next time.
Do you have anything you want to plug?
Not anything particular to plug. Just, follow me on Twitter at Mr_R_star.
Yeah.
Alrighty.
I'd invite you to, but I'm not that social.
All right. Until next time. May the Force be with you guys.
Always.
I'm Anna Graves, and thank you for listening to A More Civilized Podcast.